Welcome to Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat, a podcast for all you wine lovers who, if you're like me, just cannot get enough of the good stuff. I'm Janina, your host, brand ambassador, wine educator, and sommelier. So stick with me as we dive deeper into this ever-evolving, wonderful world of wine. And wherever you are listening to this, cheers to you.
Hello, wine friends, and welcome back to another episode where we are talking about the London Wine Fair and English wine. And may I confirm right here, right now, this is going to be the best London wine fair yet. So if you are in the trade and have not blocked out the 18th to the 20th of May and bought your tickets, honestly, book them now or live with FOMO. This year is bigger than ever. There is a brand new beer area. The signature serve zone has doubled in size. There are so many exhibitors. The entire ground floor of Kensington Olympia is full. We've got the return of Vino Verde and Wines of Germany. France has grown massively, and there are new stands from Virginia and Washington State. Plus, you're going to find wines from Georgia, Serbia, Ukraine. But the most exciting part, the Host Nation initiative for the 45th year of London Wine Fair. There's now going to be a huge pavilion putting English wine centre stage. You're going to be able to taste everything from Silverhand's Solaris Albarino made by Balfour Winery, skin contact wines and Col Fondos from Sandridge Barton, a Sauvignon Blanc from Lime Bay Winery, and this is what we're going to focus on today. I'm speaking to four brilliant producers you're going to find at the fair: Simpsons Wine Estate, Roebuck Estates, 1276 Wines, and Everflyht. I had in-depth conversations with all of them, far more than I could include here. So I've pulled together key snippets, shaping each one to bring you fresh angles, insights, and a real sense of what's happening across the English wine scene right now. We'll dive into everything from Pinot Noir Précoce and Bacchus to Meunier clones, vineyard challenges like SWD, canopy management, new technologies, recent vintages, exports, even how English yields compared to champagne. And this is all part of a much bigger story. English wine is firmly on the global stage. Champagne houses like Pommery and Taittinger have invested here. And if you want to try Taittinger's English sparkling, that's Domaine Evermond. That's here at the fair on the Hatch Mansfield stand. But it's not just the champagne houses. Jackson Family Wines and Henkel Freshness have also invested. So it feels only right to start with Charles and Ruth Simpson, owners of Domaine Sainte-Rose in France, as well as Simpsons Wine Estate in England. I begin by asking them how their focus and identity of their two estates differ.
With Domaine Sainte-Rose, we had 14 different grape varieties. We did everything from sparkling wines. We did sparkling Shiraz. We did also orange wines. We did sweet wines. We did the traditional Sauvignon Blancs, the Chardonnays. You name it, we tried it. Whereas at Simpsons, it's very much three grape varieties. So Sainte-Rose would be breadth, whereas Simpsons would be depth. So three grape varieties, but we have 12 different clones of Chardonnay, 9 different clones of Pinot Noir, 7 different clones of Pinot Meunier on 2 different rootstocks. So we've got about 50 different permutations of those three grape varieties. So breadth versus depth would be, I guess, the toolbox that we bring back to the UK.
I have to challenge you on Pinot Meunier. And how many clones did you say you have?
7.
7, because this is something that many of us are talking about Pinot Noir clones and Chardonnay clones all the time. No one's really talking about Meunier clones. And I always thought there weren't that many. Can you tell me a little bit about what you find in terms of your Meunier clones?
Yeah, I think we've planted nearly 50% of what's available. I think the reason why people don't talk about it so much, Janina, is that with things like Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, there are distinctions between the sparkling clones and the Burgundian clones. So people want to make that distinction. Yeah. With Pinot Meunier, there are no specific still wine clones. So they're just Pinot Meunier clones. And so of the 7 that we've chosen, the vast majority we will use in either way. We have parcels that we will just do short pruning or bud rubbing just to make sure the yields are left lower for the still wines that we make from Pinot Meunier, because we do one still wine made from Pinot Meunier. But you're right, there is not that same discussion about clonal selection with Pinot Meunier, and that's because I think they're all designed for sparkling, albeit you can make still wines out of them.
Well, interesting. Let's go back to sparkling. You make fantastic sparklings. If I tasted your wines blind, what would make me say, oh, this is a Simpsons wine rather than just English sparkling?
Well, we've had some lovely comments made about our wines over the years, and I would say that probably the most common one is that they do have a real sense of place. And that might be a bit corny to say it's all about the terroir, but we actually do think that there's a lot to do with our terroir in its fullest form where we're situated in East Kent. Provenance is a key part of our brand DNA. We only make wines from estate-grown fruit, so very much we know where all of that fruit has come from. We've planted it, we've nurtured it, and we've taken it on that journey. So, where we're situated in the Elan Valley is a protected national landscape. It's chalk slopes. We did very much seek out chalk because we really wanted that purity of expression, that minerality, that potential for longevity, and we're certainly seeing that in our sparkling wines. But terroir is so much more. It's all about the aspect, it's all about the slope, and it's all about the situation as well. And we're about as far east as you can get. And so maturity does tend to run east to west, whether you're growing potatoes, whether you're growing corn, whether you're growing grapes, right? So it does allow us a very long growing season. It allows us to leave some of our fruit hanging on the vines a lot longer for our still wines. But it does mean that we get that little bit more room to play with that maturity, because we do, even with our sparkling wines, we do want some concentration there. And ultimately, the importance of the chalk and the fact that we're situated, we have almost 3 sides, we're surrounded on 3 sides by the sea. The other thing that the common thread that we have is there's a degree of salinity to our wines. And that could be the influence of the maritime climate. We've got the Channel to the south, we've got the North Sea to the north and the east of us. And we're only about between 5 and 7 miles to the sea on all sides. So I do think that maritime climate does have an impact on the vineyards and therefore on the fruit itself. I suppose the other thing that people, again, trying to enhance that purity of expression is the use of innovation in the winery and use of new technologies. So we have an inertis press system, which means that we can do oxygen-free pressing in a traditional pneumatic press. When the bag inflates, gently presses. When it deflates again, it brings in oxygen, and that naturally oxygenates the fruit. Now, that's not a bad thing, but we have the possibility. We have a large sort of Zeppelin bag, plastic bag that we hang from the ceiling, and we fill that with nitrogen during the harvest. And so we have the flexibility to put on the inertis system and bring in nitrogen, and therefore protecting the fruit all the way to the tank. Now, that just allows us a much broader flavour spectrum within our blending choices. So, for example, with Chardonnay, if you were to use the traditional system and bring in oxygen, you would get lovely, more tropical notes to the juice. But the juice would be brown, it would be oxidized, which is entirely normal. If you're bringing in nitrogen, it really protects those flavors. So we get a lot more citrus, really bright Granny Smith apple flavors. And the juice remains very clear, bright and green. So it just allows us a bit more flexibility. And I do think particularly for things like our sparkling rosé, our more delicate still whites and still rosés as well, it does just allow a much more pure expression of our terroir in East Kent.
That is fascinating, because I've never had a conversation with anyone about a different type of pneumatic press. Is this something that globally more winemakers are starting to work with? Is this super new?
Well, we have 2 of only 4 that we know of in the UK, but there are more of them on the continent. We don't hear a lot about their use in Champagne because you're not allowed to use it in Champagne, which may be something to do with the fact that the traditional press manufacturers like Coca don't have that technology yet, or haven't chosen to apply it. But that's not me trying to put down their equipment, which is obviously very good for what they're doing as well. But ours is a Fäschl&Bücher press, so it's a Swiss-French, I suppose, producer, and they've been around a while. Obviously the technology is constantly improving, but it's a very valuable tool that we feel that's integral to the flavour and the profile of our wines.
But don't tell anyone.
Moving on to, why not, the Roman Road Chardonnay. Now, I happen to have with me 2023 vintage, but actually 2018 won Decanter Best in Show, did it not, in 2020?
It did.
What should people expect when they are drinking this Chardonnay in terms of balance and texture? I mean, I think you've probably already led us down that path. Purity, a little minerality, slight salinity, beautiful citrus fresh fruit, right?
Absolutely. I think the first thing to focus on here is that it's a single vineyard, single variety and single clone Chardonnay. So Charles alluded to the fact that we have planted some Burgundian still wine clones as well as sparkling Chardonnay clones. So this is made from clone 548, very specific, which is it's a Chablisian clone, and it's known for its elegance and its balance. It tends to be lower yielding, and the bunches tend to be smaller, slightly looser, but it does mean that you get amazing concentration. But then in the English scenario, obviously with the climate that we have, it's having that wiggle room to be able to leave those particular clones hanging longer on the vine than as long as possible to pick up maximum sugars. As everyone is aware, we have no problem with the acidity, and obviously there is lovely bright, zingy, citrusy acidity there, but it's all about building that texture and that mouthfeel as well. So allowing the fruit to hang a little bit longer, building that concentration, that sugar content. So for the 2023, we were picking in the very last week of October. Sometimes we have the flexibility to actually pick in November, which on very good years. So we also use Burgundian strains of yeast. So again, where we're going with this wine. It's very much designed to be a challenger for some of the Burgundian styles. But, they're obviously having to pick much earlier now to ensure that they have the acidity that they've been used to. In England now, we're probably getting the styles that they were producing in Burgundy 30 years ago. So certainly the wine has an amazingly complex sort of matrix of citrus, honeysuckle, some candied orange peel. But obviously that minerality, that flint on the nose, and an intensity, mouth-watering acidity, but also then a smoother finish.
You've basically just said everything. For me, it's very, very linear, but the texture is there giving a slight silkiness. So there is some weight, but yeah, super bright, super pure. There's lovely energy in it. I have to touch on the fact that you export about 50% of your production, which is insane for English wine.
We launched in Norway in 2019 on a very small scale. It was with a long-term agent of ours. And eventually the monopoly, because of the success of this one product, Gravel Castle, agreed to do a still Chardonnay tender. There had been sparkling tenders, but no still wine tenders. And we didn't win one. We won 2 slots, so with our Gravel Castle and our Roman Road. And that went on to eventually convert to from a trial listing to a fixed listing, and our Gravel Castle Chardonnay ended up removing or gazumping a very well-known Chablis brand. And to this very day, Gravel Castle is the single biggest seller of English wine in the marketplace, and Simpsons Wine Estate is the largest brand. We sell more volume there than anyone else, probably we probably sell twice as much, maybe 3 times as much as anyone else. And as a single, relatively small producer, we are 28% of the entire Norwegian market. And the fascinating thing, comparatively to other markets around the world, is the ability to be able to premiumize. Obviously, they are a wealthy nation and actually weathered the storm very well because they're a safe place to get energy with 2 wars around the globe. So what we're finding in Norway, they're not looking for cheaper wines. They're actually looking for more expensive wines. And they're coming to us to say, okay, it's great that you've got Roman Road at £32 a bottle, but could you do something, at £60 a bottle? And that's really unique. You don't often have that. So we have a couple of really exciting new projects starting this year that we can't say too much about for now. But needless to say, in that market, we are going up a gear. We're taking it from 10 to 11.
Incredible. That is absolutely amazing. I had no idea. That is amazing. Well done, you guys.
Thank
I want to ask, what's one misconception about English wine that you would just love to put to bed for good?
That's a really easy one. And I think as English producers, we get this all the time. And that is that English wine is too expensive. If we had £1 for every time we would hear, particularly for the sparkling wines, you'd hear people go, well, why is English sparkling wine the same price as champagne? And of course, our response is, I know, isn't it fantastic? Isn't English sparkling wine great value? The question should be, why is champagne so expensive? So, what we need to all work tirelessly at is making sure that people understand how good value English wine is, particularly the sparklings. And if you think about it, the rationale, a very easy explanation is our growing conditions are such that, our densities are pretty much a quarter of what they are in Champagne. So we would plant, 4,000 feet per feet of vines per hectare. The Champenois would be 12,000. So they're getting, 3 times as much in terms of coverage. And their yields, they're governed by the syndicate, but, they can range upwards to 120 hectolitres per hectare. In England, we'd be lucky if we got 30 hectolitres per hectare, right? So we're a quarter of the volume, yet we know the fixed costs, the growing costs are identical. Now, granted, the land in Champagne is more expensive, but that's a long-term investment, right? This is about the cost per ton or the cost per litre, and we are significantly higher. Our costs, there's no doubt, in terms of labour, in terms of electricity, is way higher. We know that as a fact. Having a business in France, we pay a lot less for labour here in France and a lot less for energy because it's subsidised by the government. So all told, our cost of production is significantly higher than it is in Champagne and Burgundy. And the final point is this is all new investment, right? You have Burgundy and Champagne estates that have been bought, sold, amateurized over 300 years, gifted from, grandfather to son to daughter. And whereas all these new projects are new money, it's going out to the banks, it's having to service debt. So the point is, why is it that, our English wine is so cheap relative to what's out there? We know our method is identical. We know the varieties are identical, but our actual cost of production is significantly higher. So it is really, I would argue, very good value.
There you go, everyone. You heard it here. You heard it here. Hopefully not first, but you've heard it again. Now, what wines are you going to be showing at London Wine Fair this year?
So we will have our whole range available. So that's 4 sparklings. We have a classic cuvée, we have a sparkling rosé, we have a blonde de noir, and we have a blonde de blanc. And then we have 5 still wines in our core range. Obviously, our Roman Road Chardonnay, along with our Rabbit Hole Pinot Noir. Then we have our Darringstone Pinot Meunier, which is our sort of our Venice unicorn that people like to call it. So a still white Pinot Meunier. And then our Rosé and our Gravel Castle. However, we will have 1 magnum of each of our Q-Class still wines from 2022. It's going to be a first come, first served basis. So if you'd like to try our super premium still white, still Chardonnay and still Pinot Noir Q-Class range, which come at £100 a bottle, then you probably need to get to us pretty darn quick. But we're going to be participating in hopefully one of the host nation masterclasses. I'm just really excited to be part of what seems like a really exciting and new lease of life for the show.
And now over to Michael Kennedy, CEO of Roebuck Estates, a name my international listeners might recognise from business class on Air Astana or British Airways, or maybe Cathay Pacific's first class lounge.
When the business was set up back in 2013, the idea was to be 100% focused on vintage. And I suppose the founders recognised that to do that, we would need to produce exceptional fruit every single year, and therefore the vineyards would be absolutely critical. So we now have 6 vineyards across Sussex, 4 in West Sussex, 1 East Sussex, one in Kent. I always start by saying if it wasn't for climate change, then we wouldn't have the English wine industry that we have today. That doesn't mean to say that that we like climate change, but that the reality is that climate change has meant that we now produce some exceptional wine in England. There are challenges. I can't necessarily go back decades because, I say, the business we started in 2013, although our oldest vineyard dates back to 2006. But if you just look recently at what's happened, there's still such variability. So average growing seasons, average degree growing days are all up, and that means that we can ripen fruit to make fantastic wine. But the reality is there's still significant variability. 2022 was our hottest year, our hottest growing season. We actually hit just over 41 degrees in our vineyard in August that year. 2023 was then our coolest growing season. I think we hit 28 degrees was the highest temperature. 2024, our wettest growing season. In 2025, our driest growing season. So you put all of that together and you see the variability. And that can bring its challenges. At the same time, the honest truth behind this is that now we can, we have the average temperatures across the year to ripen fruit to the level to make, exceptional wine. And that is, that's absolutely key. I think, the founders, when, Mike and John, when they set the business up, they recognized that because they love vintage and they wanted us to focus entirely on vintage. And that can bring its challenges in any wine growing area, not just in England. But the decision therefore was made that we were going to do this. We need exceptional sites. So those 6 sites, we now break them up into 82 individual blocks, and we manage those blocks individually throughout the growing season, and that allows us to really develop parcels of fruit and individual base wines that give us real breadth and depth at the blending table. So yes, climate change has been significant. It continues to be significant even at this point in time. How is this growing season going to pan out? We're not sure. What we do recognize, we've had bud burst this year a week earlier than last year. We will be in full bud burst in our Précoce. If it's not today, it'll be tomorrow or Friday, and that's that's about a week earlier than last year, and that means we've now got really quite an extended frost window that we will have to manage. But just going back to the vineyards, the key therefore is make sure you have vineyards in the right places with the right characteristics, and that's where we've ensured that we have vineyards and we haven't planted in areas where we think there is frost risk. So we've tried to minimize it that way.
Well, now it's interesting. You've said that you are splitting all your vineyards into blocks. So the point is that once everything's come in and you've made your base wines, so the wines have gone through the first fermentation, you may have 80 to 90 different base wines to work with to make your sparklings. So can you walk us through what might happen, a decision, the most important decision you think that's a Roebuck decision for how you put your blend together?
We are vintage only, and we do want each growing season to shine and to tell its own story in the wine, but we do also want a consistency in style as well. So we're clear on that, and there are therefore certain things that we will also always do to our wines.
And what is those Roebuck things?
Obviously, I said it starts with the vineyard, starts with the blend as well. We tend to be Pinot dominant, so that our classic cuvée is a blend of all three, but we do tend to be slightly more Pinot dominant. So the classic 19 that's out at the moment, that's 50% Pinot Noir, 13% Pinot Meunier, and then 37% Chardonnay. So we do, it is all three, but we start with that. We will always put a percentage of our wines through Malo. So, English wine's all about freshness, isn't it? It's all about freshness, purity of the fruit shining through, elegance of the wine. Acidity is generally our friend in the UK. So we will want that freshness, but we will also put an amount of our wine through malolactic fermentation. We also barrel age a percentage of our wine as well to ensure that mouthfeel component comes through strongly. We also very much we focus on long lees aging as well with our wines because we want to add that complexity. I talked about freshness, but we also like to add that toasty complexity to it. So I suppose it's really that consistency of style meeting the beautiful flavors that every year we get from the vineyard, and or the vineyards, I should say, and that's really our philosophy about bringing that together.
So would I be right in saying Pinot Noir is going to give a little bit more structure than the more linear focused Chardonnay? You've got the lees aging for complexity, a little bit of barrel aging, so therefore, and the malolactic partial. So you've got a little bit more structure, a little bit more mouthfeel and weight typically than perhaps other English sparkling wines.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that you've summed it up very well. I think realistically, we, as I said, we do want that freshness and elegance to shine through, but we do want that structure that we get from Pinot.
Well, how about I try? So for everyone, wait for it. Woohoo!
Yay! That's a beautiful sound.
Always. I have your Rosé de Noir 2019. So this is a rosé wine made from the black grapes, so Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. Tell me a little bit about this wine.
Yeah, sure. So I always start by describing our Rosé Noir as a serious rosé. So, and I see, if you look at the color, we're always looking for this beautiful rose gold color. But this is very much a serious rosé. So this is 94% Pinot Noir, 4% Pinot Meunier, and then a little splash of Pinot Précoce that we add generally for color. There's a real elegance to this wine, but you can really get that strong Pinot structure coming through. This has had about 53 months on lees, relatively low dosage. So we're about 6 grams on this. Good acidity level. So TAs on this wine by 9 or just slightly under 9, if I remember correctly. So really elegant wine, but you can get this wild strawberries coming through, little hint of pomegranate as well. I like to pick up on. But yeah, with that long lees aging, toastiness, walnut coming through, you can get all of that coming together. So.
Absolutely. There's a biscuitiness, but from toasted, maybe hazelnuts. You get a lot of this wild fruit. I'm even getting dried rose, but there's a brightness, but there's also a generosity to it as well.
Yeah.
From that long lees aging, I think.
It's a great aperitif wine, but at the same time, there's real depth to this one. That's why I like to describe it as a serious rosé.
Loads of red fruits, but almost even a slight bitter, I don't know, orange peel, tangerine peel in there. It's beautifully complex. Talk to me a little bit about Pinot Noir Précoce, because you've actually added some of that in for the dosage. So when you're adding in the sugar, the liquid that the sugar is integrated into is Pinot Noir Précoce,
That's right? Yeah. So what we will do, so we will, Pinot Noir Précoce, or early ripening Pinot. So always the first fruit that we harvest, and we will turn that into a still red, and then we will add that at dosage just for color. We don't want too much for flavor. What we really want is just color, and it's just about brightening it up a little bit at that point in time. It's interesting, obviously, because each year, the Précoce and the color element can change quite significantly depending on, if you take a hot year like 22 I described, or certainly 25. I mean, we've been blending over the last few weeks, and the Précoce, the red from 2025, really deep and rich, and we're always in the blending team fighting over who takes the bottle home to drink it as Précoce.
Oh, that is brilliant. I imagine many people listening haven't actually heard of early ripening Pinot before, which is a mutation of Pinot Noir thought to have happened in Germany, but it just works really well in England because of our cooler temperatures, where certainly in the past as well, Pinot Noir really struggled, which is of course not the case now. But with Pinot Noir Précoce, it's softer, isn't it? It's more approachable and could be a fruitier version, but doesn't quite typically get that same acidity and elegance of Pinot Noir. But quite clearly in these warmer years, this Pinot Noir Précoce is producing something quite delicious, right?
We are 100% focused on sparkling.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Not going down the still wine route. I had just described us, fighting over who takes it home.
Well, exactly.
I know maybe the answer's there, but I mean, it is lower tannin, so it is very fruit forward. I mean, that back to my point about you have to be slightly careful because, about the amount that we put in, and particularly in cooler years where you might not get quite the depth of color that you're looking for. You still have to be slightly careful because you don't want to have too much of the tannins coming through in it. But no, it's an interesting one. I'm not quite an interesting grape, I should say. I'm not quite sure how much is grown in the UK overall as a percentage.
Yeah, well, it's confusing as the YGB figures, they include Précoce into the Pinot Noir numbers, and producers don't always say on the label which one it is. Anyway, I am loving this Rosé de Noir, but I want to talk to you about Roebuck Rare Expression.
So these are small batch wines. They're one-offs. It's not something that we will repeat, I suppose. And I can't take credit for this because it's obviously our first rare expression. Number 19 is actually from our 2015 vintage. So I can't take any credit for that whatsoever. But what the team did was it identified very specific parcels. And then we decided to experiment with those in terms of lees aging. If we thought we had something particularly strong. So rare expressions number 19, first one we brought out, 2,500 bottles. It's called number 19 because it is from block 19 in our Roman Villa vineyard. So it means all the wine is purely from that single block. It's a Burgundian clone 667. So once again, I think I mentioned this earlier, grown on clay, so really intense flavors. It's had 84 months on lees. And that was a really interesting process, was lees aging. And from us, from an educational point of view, it was really interesting because it taught us that lees aging isn't linear. It taught us that it's up and down, because we first tasted this wine when it had 72 months on lees, and we did it as part of, we had the whole company together. We did it. It's quite exciting. This is going to be our first rare expression. This is going to be the first wine, and we did a big company tasting, 72 months on lees, and it was good, but I'm not sure it blew us away in the way that we were expecting. So lesson learned, don't make that your full company tasting. It's the first time. So then we were effectively tasting every 3 months. And what we could tell was it was just getting better and better and better. And when we got to 84 months, we're like, wow, this is fantastic. So it was really interesting from our point of view, that learning curve. So we brought that out. 2,500 bottles, limited edition, fantastic wine that has been served in Mandarin Oriental at £39 a glass.
There you go. Everyone run. Don't walk.
Absolutely. I should point out that the Mandarin Oriental is obviously a very different environment. So, but no, I mean, it's fantastic wine, coming from that vineyard. Our second rare expression is number 96. And that's because that is actually from our 2014 blend, and it's had 96 months on lees. So another fantastic wine. And hopefully later on this year, we'll be bringing out our third rare expression, which will be a very much focusing on some Chardonnay clones. So
watch this space.
All will be revealed, absolutely.
Well, no, you talked about the quality of these wines comes from the vineyard. One of the things I was quite impressed about is that I think you're the only English winery with a dedicated ecologist on the team.
Matt, who's our in-house ecologist, he works as part of the viticulture team. It's about the tension between viticulture and ecology for us. What we've tried to do to encourage bats into the vineyard, because they then help keep some of the moth populations under control. Did you know that, bats will eat something like 3,000 insects a night? And so we've tried to embed some of that in, because then that is acting as a natural balance within the vineyard. So recently we actually put a biodiversity pond into one of our vineyards. And the idea behind that is that putting water into the vineyard is one of the best ways to attract biodiversity, particularly the bats, that we're looking for. Interestingly as well, it also helps regulate, or also helps keep frost management under control a little bit, having that body of water. So it's about bringing these things together. I mean, the other big thing, obviously, SWD.
That's spotted wing Drosophila, which we've been suffering with since I think 2012. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's right. And 2023 was a particularly bad year for SWD. So, and that, it's a pest. And one of the things we've been working on with Matt, our ecologist, is effectively diversionary food sources. So SWD will prefer to feed on softer berries. So effectively, what we've been trying to do is look at how we manage certain hedgerows and the berries within certain hedgerows, so that will be a diversionary tactic to keep the SWD away from the vines. Now, where I talk about this tension, of course, by having alternative food sources, then you can attract other things. And therefore, it's about ensuring that the diversionary food sources are in the right place. We track and audit plant species, mammals, bird life in the vineyards, all with the ecologist, Matt. We're looking at how we develop that. He's working also in terms of with our team, the viticulture team, in terms of some of the trials we're doing on soil health as well. So, and some of the, particularly the fungi trials that we're doing there. So, to help with our cover crops. So it's really, really interesting.
And for those of us that are going to be at London Wine Fair, what wines are you going to be showing?
So we will have our classic range. So that's our classic Cuvée 2019, the Rosé de Noir that we've just tried, our Blanc de Noir, which is from 2018. Both rare expressions, number 19 and number 96. Lots of fantastic winemakers are going to be there as well. So it should be a really interesting show.
Next, I'm talking to Lawrence Cocking, head winemaker at 1276, based in a part of England you wouldn't immediately think of for vineyards, Herefordshire.
No, it's not where most people would think that you're growing grapes in England. And I definitely didn't even know about Herefordshire before I moved here. I moved here to make cider originally, which makes sense because that's what the region's known for. But if, cider production, so we're over in the West Midlands, the last county before you get to Wales. So undulating hills, quite a nice range of different soil types and, ranging from where I live in the Malvern Hills, which is this sort of almost kind of jutting out of the landscape, huge, old volcanic geology.
Really?
Yeah, this sort of igneous sort of outcrop.
Okay.
And so you obviously granitic soils around there.
Yeah.
And then on the sort of slopes of the Malvern Hills, you get limestone outcrops and then these sort of ridge and furrow landscapes where you get these strata of limestone, which in between the strata, the water has eroded the soil in between. And so you get these kind of like dips.
Okay.
And there's some vineyards planted on the Malvern Hills. There's two who I visited and have worked with quite closely. So that's really interesting. But where we are is sort of further sort of southwest in Herefordshire, in Ledbury.
Okay.
And the first thing I noticed when I moved to Herefordshire, so I come from Kent originally. So Kent known for apples, hops and grapes, obviously, and soft fruit. And this is something I found really familiar about Herefordshire was its hops are grown here, apples, pears, and now grapes as well. And why can't you plant grapes here? If those industries are doing so well, then there's a reason that they're still here, and that's because they grow well here. So that was the first thing I noticed about the landscape, which there's a sort of familiarity to it, but not quite as flat as Kent. So it was quite nice to actually have a little bit of a topography. But the main thing I noticed is when it rains, all the roads flood, and it's this amazing like red muddy water, like bright red, like
okay.
sort of all like brick earth sort of color. And so that was the first thing I was like, I've never seen that anywhere in the UK. And like my original degree was in geography, so I kind of spot these kind of things. And so that really fascinated me, and that's predominantly where we're planted, is on a south facing slope, quite rich clay soils. There's a little bit of like a glacial deposit in one of the vineyards as well.
Ooh la la.
I don't know what that means for the wine quality yet, but yeah, we like that vineyard. Yeah, it sounds good. And so yeah, it's rich clay soil really, and is that kind of like really sort of, it's not as densely populated as other counties, so it is definitely an agricultural landscape.
Fascinating. I mean, one of the things that you were telling me about is the name of these wines is 1276 because of the history of English wine growing in Herefordshire. So it dates back to that 1276, right?
Well, so we rebranded last year.
Yes.
We grow fruit in our own vineyard, and our previous name had no link to our own vineyard, so it made sense to actually, well, if we're going to make wine from this vineyard, then the name should be related to our site. So the vineyard owners, they're both in their 80s, and they've worked and lived on this farm for years, and they've obviously done a lot of research into the history of their farm. They found this record in Herefordshire Cathedral of the Bishop of Herefordshire, Thomas de Cantelupe. He commissioned the planting of vines on the southern slopes of the Wall Hills, which is literally where we are.
Okay.
So, 750 years ago, somebody looked at this site and thought it would be a good place to plant vines. And so we really latched onto that idea, and because we're kind of continuing that heritage. And I think there's more of a winemaking heritage in the UK than people think. And it goes back all the way to Roman times, I think, in theory. But
I was going to say 43 BC, the Romans brought the vines.
Yeah.
And back in the Doomsday Book in the 11th century, there were 42 vineyards.
Was there
back
really?
then.
There you go.
Yeah. And then obviously there wasn't a lot during the Middle Ages. And then there was the frozen era of people having fairs on the River Thames in London, which is just incredible. So yeah, we had a little mini ice age.
We have that heritage, but like the influence that history has had on our current viticultural landscape is pretty hard to tie together. Like not nowhere near to the same degree as in France. But I mean, I have this kind of like romantic idea that there's quite a lot of Cistercian monks in this area, or at least there was in the medieval period. And obviously they are quite famous for coming up with the whole terroir concept and the appellation system in Burgundy. And so I like to think in 1276, when they were looking for help in planting vines here, they used the knowledge of the Cistercian monks, and they could potentially have planted Pinot Noir and Chardonnay on this site. But
well, they're not here to say yes or no.
They're not
Why
here
not?
to say, and there's no archaeological evidence whatsoever, so we can say what we want.
Yes, we can. I mean, so you've mentioned all these different soil types, and the fact, though, that you're growing the same fruit and crops as Kent, which is the sunniest county because it's in the southeast. Do you find, though, that you're able to get fruit with the same ripening, acidity levels? Is it, obviously, I assume the same frost risks. Is it still similar rainfall patterns? I assume you're getting a lot more rain.
It's wetter here, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely wetter here and definitely less sun. But our particular site, so it's, like I said, it's a south-facing slope. We've got the top of the south-facing slope is covered in woodland.
Okay.
So like when you see vineyards in Chablis or in Burgundy, they tend to have this woodland protection on the north side of the top of the hill. So we have that protection, and then we have the Ledbury Hills, which is to our west, and then this other range of hills called the Markle Ridge to our east. And so if you look at it from like a macro scale, it's kind of like you can understand why you plant vines here. You couldn't get away with planting those varieties anywhere in Herefordshire, I don't think. You need it's very specific on the site. So because we've got such kind of heavy clay soil, I think that's what lends that ripening ability of those grape varieties to our particular site.
Well, what grape varieties, may I ask?
well, it's the three champagne varieties. So
Yep.
Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and then we have Bacchus,
Yeah.
and we also have Mascaris.
And Mascaris is cool because it's a peewee variety, isn't it? Is it the future of wine? I don't know, but is it? Or we'd have to spray as much.
I don't see why not. I think it makes we use it for our non-vintage sparkling wine, and it brings this amazing pineapple-y quality. Like it's one of those grape varieties where the wine tastes like the grapes.
Interesting.
Which is it's got a really nice kind of phenolic quality to it.
Yeah.
Ripens really nicely. You can be more gentle in the growing of the vine, so less spraying.
Which is important. So Mascaris, everyone, keep an eye on that. But I have to say, you mentioned Bacchus. I know that you personally, as a winemaker, you're a strong advocate for this grape variety. So, I mean, why is it so exciting for you, Bacchus?
I really like Bacchus. I didn't always like Bacchus. I think I probably had a bit of snobbery about it. I thought just, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Pinot Meunier, why wouldn't you plant those? They're proven and they work really well. And I always had this kind of perception of Bacchus as being maybe a little bit rustic, a little bit out of balance, a bit dilute. And I don't think that opinion of mine came out of nowhere. I think some of the Bacchuses I had were maybe a little bit like that. But I'm really excited about it now because if you look at other wine regions in the world, that quite a few of them have got their sort of adopted grape variety. So Argentina's got Malbec, or New Zealand's Sauvignon Blanc. But England has this unique grape variety, Bacchus, which you don't see really anywhere else. There's, I guess, some in Germany or like Eastern Europe and, some other places that I'm not aware of. But I really like, I get quite excited about it because it's a unique grape variety that we have. And so I found it quite fun working with it and trying to get it into a place where I enjoy it, where it's not like overtly floral and grassy. It's maybe a little bit more restrained. There's maybe a little bit more texture on the palate. But I'm not trying to hide Bacchus's individual qualities. Like, it is what it is, and
You're always going to get the
you're
elderflower.
always going to get it. and it is consistent every single year in terms of how it tastes relatively. And I kind of respect it for that reason. And that it's not fickle, really. It is what it is. And I really like aromatic white wines, especially sort of crisp, lighter aromatic white wines. And I could easily just make barrel-aged Chardonnay and try and replicate Burgundy, but it's quite nice to do something different and to feel like you're sort of pioneering something in terms of a unique style of wine. So I think generally most people are sort of upping their Bacchus game a little bit. So some people are doing like whole bunch pressing or barrel fermentation. I think that's really interesting. So I've kind of, since I started 2024, we had a bit of a tricky year, as did everybody. So we had the opportunity to actually put the wine through a malolactic fermentation.
Bacchus, it's high acidity in England, but it's not actually as high acidity as many other grapes. So ironically, by taking that malic acid, the sharp apple acid, and turning it into that more dairy acid, you run the risk of maybe making a more flabby style, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely true. I mean, there's certain wines like, Janina, and I guess that's a love or hate kind of wine, but they're unashamedly
Viognier.
I don't think... Yeah, Viognier, exactly. But that wasn't what I was trying to do. It was just because I had the opportunity to. So I did a sort of partial malo. And I found that really helped. I still retain some malic acid, and it just gives it a really nice sort of glossy mouthfeel. And it restrained the aromatics a little bit. And actually, we've had a lot of people go, I don't like Bacchus. When you go to a restaurant, try to sell your wine, they go, no one ever buys Bacchus. But you taste it with them, and it's converted so many people. So that was quite a nice thing. So I thought after 2024, well, that's it. That's how I make Bacchus from now on. Well, then we had 2025.
It was so warm and sunny.
We just had this amazing amount of sun. And I was thinking initially, this is amazing because we're going to finally get Bacchus really ripe and we're going to see nectarine and tropical fruit. But you may know, but the acids of Bacchus, they drop quite quickly. And those acids were dropping quicker than those sugars were rising. So we had to pick on the acids. And so as a result of that, I couldn't actually fulfill my malolactic Bacchus dream in the 2025. Yeah, because it wasn't worth it. And I actually, thinking about it, I liked the mouthfeel, the texture that the 24 had. But I think, always being critical of your own wines, that kind of like really fresh, appley, crisp quality, that kind of central core that you have to Bacchus. I kind of wanted to retain that in the following 25 vintage. So not doing a malolactic, I think, was quite useful in the 25. That's not in bottle yet. But what I am doing is trying to build that texture. So batonaging, but still in stainless steel. So we're maintaining the aromatics and the florality of Bacchus, but at the same time trying to make something a bit more interesting.
Building in texture.
Yeah, so I'm quite excited about it.
I think Bacchus to watch. Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I'm glad that you're supporting Bacchus because it is our grape, but I have your 2024 Chardonnay that won. What did it win? I've forgotten. Would you remind me?
Yeah, well, unashamedly, I'm more than happy to tell you what medal it won, but it's gold. It won gold at the IWC. Just doing the sort of standard things that you do with Chardonnay, so whole bunch pressing, straight into barrels for fermentation, bought third use barrels from Burgundy. So try not to be too overtly oaky. And then, batonage. And it stayed in those barrels all the way up until bottling. And there's also there's a tank component as well. So it's not 100% barrel. It's it's kind of using oak. I want the fruit to be the focus, but that oak just really rounds it off.
Well, I get why it got 95 points out of 100. This is such an interesting Chardonnay. It's got this super lemon sherbet nose, like dusty rose petals. I can't believe how floral it is. Actually, even fresh florals as well. And then the palate, oh my God, like a poached pear and vanilla cream.
Exactly.
It's pretty. This is a really pretty, slightly perfumed. There's softness to the Chardonnay, and it's got all the freshness and the acidity, but not in that austere or super linear way. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate this, and I find this very different than other Chardonnays I've had in England.
It is quite different. I've had that feedback before.
Yeah, in a good way.
In a good way. You're drinking a Chardonnay which is on the border of Wales. So it's not going to be super rich and creamy. No. It's not going to be a Meursault. It's not what I'm trying to do. But at the same time, I don't think it's a Chablis either because we don't have that chalk.
It's beautiful. It is beautiful.
Thank you very much.
I am interested in what you're doing with your grape varieties because I know this is not your main focus, but you are experimenting with The Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, because you have them under protective tunnels, right?
We do, yes. Highly controversial.
Yeah.
But we, so what the company that we're a part of is really sort of changed the face of how you grow soft fruit internationally. So that's Haygrove, and they manufacture polytunnels and they grow soft fruit all around the world. So it would be silly for us not to experiment with polytunnels with vines. So that experiment sort of was set up before I arrived. So I initially probably would, if I was honest, slightly skeptical about it. But after the 2024 vintage, the Chardonnay and the Pinot Noir that we pressed was amazing. And we reached sugars and ripeness levels in those polytunnels at levels far higher than we would ever have achieved in the vineyard. So
in the wild,
yeah. So yeah, it's really, I think, quite an exciting thing to be part of is experimenting with that. We sell, like you mentioned, Cabernet Sauvignon. We sell that to an urban winery in London called Renegade.
Yeah,
they
make some great wines.
Yeah, and so I think they make a rosé, or it's like a pet nat or something like that from it. So they really like it. But I don't think it's ever going to make like Bordeaux style wines, but it's
give us 30 years. Ugh.
Yeah, right.
You won't need the polytunnels, but I love that I suppose, why not experiment?
Yeah, and
you don't know till
we've
you
got
try.
an experimental vineyard under polytunnels, so we're growing things like Riesling, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Gewürztraminer. So I'll be making small batches of wines from them each year, and some of them have been better than others. The Gewürztraminer's really nice. Cabernet Franc's been really interesting, but it's only 10 vines, so I just make a few demi-johns of it.
Fun.
But if we were to expand it, it would be things like probably Pinot Gris or Gewürztraminer. I think Cabernet Franc potentially, but it's quite hard to ripen even in a warm climate.
Fun. Well, let us see. Now, what wines are you showing at London Wine Fair? What do I get to try? 2
non-vintage sparkling wines. So that's a Blanc de Blanc, 100% Chardonnay, and that one's silver at the IWC. And then the Madeleine Mascaris, the non-vintage, sort of quite aromatic Cremant style wine. We'll be showing our new sparkling rosé, which is Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and Pinot Noir Précoce. And then the 3 stills, so the 24 Chardonnay, 24 Bacchus, and actually a 2023 Pinot Noir Précoce, which is our current red wine. We made in 2024 a Pinot Noir, so moving away slightly from Pinot Noir Précoce as our focus for red wine, but still playing a part in the blend. So I might bring a few samples of that, but it's sort of pre-release stage at the minute.
And finally, I'm speaking with Luke Spalding, General Manager and Viticulturalist at Everflyht, a true leader in regenerative practices in England.
With Everflyht, it's a lot easier to manage just a single estate. We're not obviously having to worry about logistics across many, but also it gives us a real kind of opportunity to showcase the terroir probably of the South Downs, or our area of the South Downs. So it's a bit unusual for us. We actually are fully on clay. So
I didn't expect you to say that.
No,
okay.
So we are on full clay. So it's a bit unusual. Everyone hammers home about chalk and everything like that, and being the same as champagne. Well, we're not. And to be honest, it adds a real richness to our wines. We get a bit more structure, a bit more body, a bit more roundness, especially with the Pinots. So it helps us give us a bit more of a different profile to a lot of English wines out there.
Yeah.
And I prefer clay. It's highly rich in nutrition. We never really have to do any kind of soil work in terms of fertilizer. So again, low inputs, a bit more sustainable kind of ethos.
Interesting.
Backing us up there. Whereas you find a lot of English vineyards have like 30-40% Chardonnay, 30-40%, 50% Pinot Noir, and then 5, 10, 15% of Meunier. We are now actually 30% Meunier, and 30% Pinot Noir, and 30% Chardonnay. And then the rest, the 10%, is made up of Gamay, Pinot Gris, and Pinot Précoce.
Ooh, talk to me about Gamay and Pinot Gris.
So, Pinot Gris for me, I think is one of the most promising grape varieties in the UK to be planted. I think the versatility of it is fantastic. You can do rosé, you can do still white, you can do skin contact orange wines, you can do skin contact white wine with it, you can do barrel, you can do a lot of barrel work with it. It can stand up to that. You can keep it super fresh and lead it with just tank. You can do dessert wines with it, but you can also do sparkling wines with it, which is what we've been using it for. And it's just such a versatile grape. I think we'll see it continue to grow in terms of planting area across the UK over the next 5-10 years, and probably outstrip Bacchus as the primary English still grape variety.
Interesting. I mean, I've tasted some lovely still Pinot Gris, and it is. I'm really intrigued as to why it hasn't become bigger yet. But I guess for now we need to say watch this space.
Yeah, I think you will see. I mean, there's a fair few producers now producing a Pinot Gris. Obviously, the one that everyone I hope would know about is Stopham. They probably planted the biggest planting of it first.
I'm really excited about Gamay as well, and Gamay can make some really delicious rosés that I've had.
And with Gamay, it was a bit of a wild card. We did want to do something, a point of difference. You know, when we planted it in 21, we were thinking that we would produce a still wine from it. We have now, after, 2024 was a bit of a tricky vintage for most UK producers. We've decided that really Everflyht is a championing of sparkling wine, and that's where we see our wine production really being all about. So Gamay will go into another sparkling wine, probably a rosé in the future. We're just going to do some trials with it.
Okay, interesting. You've done a lot of work around cool climate canopy management. I mean, what is one technique that's had the biggest impact on fruit quality or yields?
It's mainly about bud exposure, so that throughout the growing season. So leaf stripping is really important for us. We actually have we've moved away from manual leaf stripping into mechanical about 3 years ago, mainly because of COVID.
Interesting. Okay.
However, we've actually built a community or a team of local people. We're actually going to move back into doing it manually.
Most people listening will go, everything done manually is better. But now with technology and the advances, sometimes it doesn't make that much of a difference. You've obviously going back manually, so it is better?
Yeah, for us, we're finding it is better because with a machine, you are literally like leaf stripping at a certain level or a certain, amount or a certain depth or height consistently across the row.
Right.
The issue is vines aren't consistent and vineyard isn't consistent. A vineyard typically has about 60% variation across the entire site. Being a bit geeky about it.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the stats. And the fruit height or the fruit zone across each vine is slightly different, especially when, with our pruning method, which is cordon, which is we're one of the biggest cordon pruning vineyards in the country, or in terms by percentage area of our estate. We have fruit zones varying from 20 centimeters high to 30, 40 centimeters high.
Right.
And a mechanical leaf stripper won't cover that variation. Whereas now going back to manual, we can seem to get a far better, more consistent leaf removal, depending on the vine that we're actually removing the leaves from. So it's about building quality back in, but also helping a consistent yield, going forward.
And talk to me about leaf stripping. You've said about the fact that the fruiting zone is in slightly different places. Are you stripping leaves simply around the bunch of grapes so that it can see more sun exposure? Or are you actually also picking leaves in other places as well with another thought in mind?
No, so we mainly pick around the fruit, or at least around, especially in the cordon, the lower bud nodes for the next year. Because vines are perennial, so what happens in season 1 or this year will affect what happens in season 2 in terms of bud fertility, in terms of number of potential clusters that we have going in. Having maximum sunlight going into those buds developing is key. So it's not just about fruit. It's always about thinking further ahead into the following season, or even going further forward. The other thing that we don't do to help is we don't trim the vines. We actually leave them just to keep on growing.
Yes.
And we do tucking in. And that reduces lateral growth on the shoots. So we actually reduce lateral shoot development. And again, that stops the bushiness of the vines. It also reduces the canopy depth, and again allows the vines to be a bit more receptive to a photosynthetic radiation, or basically increases the photosynthesis of the vine.
But if you're tucking in, so that's going through the wires for anybody listening, what happens though when they continue growing up? Because these are crazy lianas. They love to, they want the sun. They're going to keep on going. So what happens when it's already way above the top wire?
Yeah, so if we do really need to trim, we will trim it probably normally around July time, end of August. And that's if we're going to do it, that's when we do it. So just before veraison. That way we've had lots of time for, the vines to just concentrate on doing what they need to do in terms of growing their main shoots and not reducing that lateral growth. But we also do tuck the actual physical main shoot back into the canopy or wrap it along the top foliage wire.
Yep.
And that just reduces the spread as it goes out, and then obviously the shading in the actual row, which can also affect things.
Interesting.
Also, because we don't smash the vineyard with loads of inputs in terms of foliar feeds and fertilizer year on year, we are seeming to get a more balanced vine. And that way we're not an over vigorous vine, which, you can see in certain climates, especially cool with like aggressive amounts of water.
Well, now see, it's interesting. You said about you're not putting things on the vines. You have introduced regenerative viticultural practices in the vineyard. So really thinking about soil health, amongst other things. So what is one practical change that you've implemented that has made for you maybe the most measurable difference in the vineyard?
The biggest thing for me is actually seeing a reduction in inputs, in actual total inputs across the site in terms of pesticides. We cut out insecticides in 2019. So, that was the first thing we cut out. Sometimes that's one of the last things farmers actually cut out on a regenerative path.
Oh, why?
We chose to be more aggressive.
How comes?
Because it's insects that, are one of the last things to actually be deterred by healthy vines or healthy plant systems. The issue is basically Brix levels in vascular systems of vines. If a sugar level is over 13 Brix in the actual vascular system of the plant or the leaf, it is actually protecting itself from funguses like powdery mildew, downy mildew.
Okay.
So that's why when you see crops like like grapes, when they get to veraison, we actually see a massive drop in potential effects with powdery and downy mildew because the grape sugars are higher and they're also fending off that fungus. With insects, it's totally different.
Okay.
They're attracted to sugar. They're wanting sugar. So whereas that whole kind of healthy plant system works with like funguses, it doesn't work potentially with insects or pests because they're actually being attracted to it by a hormone response.
Interesting.
But we still chose to go insecticide free.
So how do you become insecticide free?
So it's about careful management. It's giving them a different food source.
Right.
It's also, if you're increasing the food chain, so if insects, whether it's fruit flies, wasps, bees, all of these are, they're at one level of the food chain. There is a predator above them. And if you manage your ecosystem correctly, at some point it will balance out naturally. Mm-hmm. Okay. So yes, there was a couple of years where it's a little bit difficult, or we were seeing high degrees of either moths or insects coming onto site because we weren't using insecticides. But to be honest, over the last 2 years, we've actually seen it balance out. As
you're developing and building your ecosystem, it eventually sorts itself out, right?
It will get there. You've just got to, sometimes it's a bit hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But we've definitely seen it, some real big steps in the last couple of years in terms of the ecosystem of different insects, plants, vertebrae, also buzzards now we have on site, which is fantastic. We've even got a red kite coming down from the South Downs that goes over the vineyard.
Beautiful.
So we're really creating a massive ecosystem that is just full of life and is slowly balancing out. But we also do other things where we can try and manage or mitigate the progress of certain insects, and we actually insect net our Bacchus. Our Bacchus is very early ripening Pinot Noir.
Yeah,
it is very susceptible to insects, especially SWD, spotted winged Drosophila.
Mm-hmm.
And to stop any of that coming in, we actually make a barrier. We cover the entire part of that vineyard in insect nets, which they can't get through.
Interesting. Is that very expensive though?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes doing things right is not always the cheapest.
Okay. Now let's actually talk about your wines. For the Cuvée Edition 3, which is on the market, what is one detail in how it's grown, or I think would genuinely surprise a wine geek?
Okay, so I mean, for us, I think that the thing about the Cuvée range is the Solara system. So when we started, when I was working with Ben Sam Early Doors in 2018, we took a crop in our third year, which wasn't very big. It was 6 tons. And rather than, rush things or put something out early, we actually decided to put the entire vintage into a reserve tank. And then our first true vintage was actually 19, and that's the first wine we actually bottled. But what we then did is every year we started bringing down some of that reserve tank, putting it into the cuvée range, and then topping it back up with the newest vintage. So now that tank has 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 25 once we bottled. So it's a real story of Everflyht, but it also just shows the elevation of our wines and also the foresight to try and add quality into a cuvée so early doors. And again, patience, not rush it. The other thing is we are super low dosages. So it's 1 gram of dosage.
Ooh, yeah.
So yeah, keeps it super clean, super tight. You've definitely got that energy in that direction. Bit of saline to it because we're only 5 miles from the coast.
There we go. It allows it probably to shine through a little bit more. Yeah. Now tell me about Wild, the new edition. What's the thinking behind this?
Sparkling wine is the bread and butter of English wine. And I think as long as anyone's drinking sparkling, as long as it's really good quality, then that's what they should be drinking. So we went, right, how do we get our wines into more people's hands?
Because this is produced in the tank method. So isn't it the same way as Prosecco as opposed to all your other sparklings, which are traditional method? Like
correct. So
it's
yes,
made in
it
Champagne.
is produced in a quicker method called Charmat. Is the storage fee is the killer for traditional method. You know, the time that we have to wait. You know, if we look at our first wines, we harvested our first proper vintage, as I said, in 19, and we actually didn't release that wine until 2022 July. Okay, this wine, Wild, we built it from multi-vintages from using our Solara system that we already had in place, and then adding in the base wine of 25, and we are now releasing it this month, which, you know, is a huge, quick turnaround for us. One of the most successful ones, I think, personally, I don't mind blowing the trumpet for them, is Flint. Their Charmat Rosé is fantastic. So that's our benchmark.
Interesting.
Get as close to that or beat it or, you know, whatever that's one of the benchmarks that we had in place. And yeah, the reserve wine is there to add depth and add quality and add story. I like saying that word, story, and I think it just kind of sums up the kind of complexity that we're looking for, is that weight in the mid palate that you may not be used to with a Charmat.
Mm-hmm. We can come and taste it, can't we, at London Wine Fair?
Yep.
It will be there.
It will be there.
Alongside Cuvée Edition 3. And what else is going to be at London Wine Fair?
So the London Wine Fair, we're actually going to do a couple of things. Because it's our 10th year, we're actually showing portfolio wines from the cellar. We're bringing them out especially for our trade people who are coming to the London Wine Fair. So we're showing one of our first cuvées that's been on lees. It's from our library stock. So we're bringing that out, 0 dosaging it, and just showing how cellar age develops the wine.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to show some of our future wines as well that
Perfect.
we've got potentially coming out in the next 2 or 3 years.
I hope you are all sufficiently inspired to go and drink more English wine. And of course, if you're available to come to London Wine Fair, you're going to find all the information in the show notes. I hope to see you there. Now, next week, we're heading to Bacchus in Spain, diving into all things Albarino. And to finish off with a quote, as Hugh Johnson once said, "Wine connects man and nature and time in a way nothing else does." Wishing you all a wonderful week. Until next Monday, wine friends, cheers to you.